Okay, we are going to start our lesson study revamp discussion. And this is the group of Allison, Michael, and Danielle. And to begin, we'll just explain what our lesson was initially. So it was my lesson, and it was for a grade 12 calculus 30 class. And it was a lesson basically on optimization. And so what I wanted to do initially was create a real life scenario in which students could use optimization. And so then I thought, oh, in real life, what kind of area maybe would I want to optimize or benefit from? And then I thought, oh, what better than optimizing the area of a strawberry garden, because I love strawberries. And like if we wanted to create a business, we would obviously want to grow the most strawberries as possible so we could make the most money possible and also eat as many strawberries as we could. So that was the problem that we posed to them, and just basically said, maybe we're going to start a summer business, and it's going to be a you pick strawberry farm, and let's just brainstorm some business ideas. So from there, we threw it out to the class. This is freezing. We threw it out to the class. We wanted them to come up with the ideas for the business and all the factors that they'd have to include in their business plan financially. So I'm sorry, this is okay. Sorry, this is slow. Okay. So students came up with all of the ideas, things that they'd have to account for financially. I gave them an idea of how much money we would spend or how much money each student would invest. And if each student were to invest X amount of dollars, how much money would we have to start our whole business for the first summer? And then knowing that, then we kind of accounted for like, okay, we're going to have to pay for strawberry seed, we're going to have to pay for maintenance, pay our workers, things like that. So the students came up with that. Then I threw out the idea, how are we going to make the most money possible? And of course everybody said, I wanted them to say this, so I kind of, hinted at this, that we need to grow as much strawberries as possible in order to make the most money. So given that each student would invest X amount of dollars, we decided as a class how much money we would allot for fencing, and then knowing how much money we had for fencing, and like if fencing were to cost X amount of dollars per square foot or per foot or whatever, how much, like what kind of perimeter of a garden could we use. This is being so slow. Okay, so then because the point of the lesson was optimization, I didn't want to just tell them we need to optimize the area of the garden. So I set it up in a table if I could get there. I set it up in a table so that students could just test dimensions of a garden, of a set perimeter. Okay, here we go. Right here we set it up in a table. So given that we wanted a garden of perimeter 128 meters, we just tested out different dimensions, possible dimensions, and looked at what the different possible areas we could have. And obviously we want a garden with the greatest area so that we could grow the most strawberries and profit the most. So then they could just see from the chart that the dimensions of a square are what optimize the area of a garden. So then from that we would go on to, in the future lessons, we would have learned about optimization using differentiation and other methods. So that was how the lesson was initially.
once I get back to the top here, I'll show you how we revamped the lesson. We kept the basic idea, but we kind of scrapped the rest. The lesson plan on the left here is obviously the original, and the one on the right is the one that we adapted. We kept our general outcome the same. We didn't want to change that. The specific outcome was the same. We added a student outcome, and that was for students to apply knowledge of optimization to real-life scenarios. And as you can see, we kept the You Pick Strawberry Farm, but we wanted the students to create the business plan for it. So we kind of decided to make this into more of a project than it was before. The achievement indicator was pretty much the same, except we wanted the students to focus on the business plan a little bit more. Their prior knowledge, we decided to make this, instead of a one lesson, we decided to make it kind of into a unit project. So they've already, before Allison had it so that the students were learning optimization in this lesson, but we decided to make it so that they had already learned about optimization. They were going to use that knowledge for their business plan. And because we changed a lot about the lesson, we had to change all of the different adapted dimensions, so even into how the groups were formed and stuff like that. We changed. The understandings stay the same. The essential questions we changed, and Mike will kind of talk a bit more about that as we go further into the lesson plan. And we didn't change the knowledge and skills because we still wanted the students to get the same thing out of the lesson. Once this one scrolls down, I'll talk about the performance tasks. Well, the new performance task would be the students brainstorm the types of expenses that a business would face. And before, the teacher was kind of guiding that a little bit, and they would do it as a class, as an activity, and we decided maybe that would be better done for students to do in a group, in their business groups. And then the other evidence, we still wanted students to, or we still wanted the teachers to observe the students' responsiveness to the lesson in the classroom assessment. But we decided to get students to perform self-assessment on their performance in their business plan groups.
Alright, so as Danielle has described, we obviously did make, it looks like there's a lot of red on the right here when I scroll down, but like the basic premise for the lesson is still pretty much the same. We really liked the idea so much so that we wanted to turn it from just a class or two into like an entire project. So originally we presented them with the scenario like, oh, we had this good idea last night, this You Pick Strawberry Farm, and as you can see on the left here, we had like the list of all of like the rough brainstorming things that we hoped the students would accomplish. And let me just scroll this one down a little bit here. So like the basic like presentation of the idea is pretty much the same. Like, oh, I had this like really good idea last night, a You Pick Strawberry Farm. Obviously there's a major overlap between the right side and the left side. But the basic premise we wanted to know was like, we want like the students to design this activity from scratch. Sorry. So we have in bold here, these are pretty much our essential questions. You know, where are we getting the money from? How much money do we need to start out? A lot of monetary questions. How do we want to set up the garden? How long is the business going to be in operation? Things like that. And so we pretty much made it like more of a student-oriented project rather than the teacher presenting them with like, okay, like Allison talked about, we just want to do the fencing, as you can see with the table here. But we wanted students to come up with the things like fencing, the list up here. We wanted them to come up with all of this stuff, and they could dive into it. You know, they would be the ones to talk about like advertising, to talk about fencing, seeds, stuff like that. And so from expanding it, I think we took it from just like a lesson or two, which was kind of closed-ended. I'd say still very inquiry-based, but we took it to a lot more open-ended, and I think the students will definitely get more out of it in that regard. Obviously, because we do have different essential questions, and I'd say they're also more in depth. because it will take more time than we had from our previous lesson, but it should be, I don't know, a lot more beneficial for the students, and they'll be able to get more out of it from their knowledge and optimization.